Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Training Unleashed. On behalf of the Learning Network, we appreciate you being here for our show. I also want to take a moment and do a shout out to our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. Also remind everybody that we're on YouTube now, Training Unleashed Network on YouTube. We have a great guest with us today. His name is Max Holvik, and he is the CEO and President of Training Systems Design and the Learning Staff. And we're going to have an excellent topic because he's a true expert on training. A lot of times we have topics about coaching, leadership, HR issues, and things like this. But today we're really going to get into training, which is exciting. So Max, the premise of this show is that most companies undervalue training. Training is ineffective for them. But if they actually focus on training, they're going to be incredibly successful. They're going to unleash the potential of training. Why is it, do you think, that most companies, assuming you agree with me, most companies undervalue training and don't really invest in training the way they should?
Great question. And first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I'm a big fan and grateful to be here. I fully agree with you. I do think that there is a mismatch often between you hear a lot of people and businesses saying, or people are our most important assets, and training is crucial. At the same time, when you see budget being cut or increased, training is often the one that's the first victim of that. And I think there's a few different reasons for it. One of it is and I believe you've said this several times on your show, that the training department needs to be more entrepreneurial. So I think we in the training world are not necessarily thinking enough or understand. But there's a host of other factors as well that I think contributes to it. Part of it to do with the lack of ROIs and measuring the training, and the need to bake the objectives into the structure of the training before you even produce the training. So I think there's a host of different factors, but yeah, I completely agree with you.
So I want to just echo something I just heard you say.
Yeah.
Okay. Want to totally agree that training needs to be more entrepreneurial, but the lack of measures and ROI analysis really hurts. People need to do a better job. But I'm going to add another reason why. I think companies underinvest and they create mediocre training products. And when they do that, the staff hates the training and they think, oh my God, another training program. I don't want that. Rather than, wow, I wonder what kind of fun, exciting thing they've created for us this time. And
great. Yes. And I saw enough of this in my previous career. I spent a good 15 years in finance and investment before I jumped into the learning world. So I'm relatively new, and I saw enough of training that was not very engaging, and it was a pain to go through. And it wasn't always explained well why we had to do the training, and so seeing that from the learner's perspective, I agree with you. We need to make more engaging training. And that could come in a variety of fashions, whether it's splitting it up and making more micromanaged training rather than, an hour or 2 hours of an online course, or more mixable modalities based on what is needed for the training objective. Yes, we need to make it more engaging.
Yeah. So when you work with a client, and your professional training company, in fact, your company is very similar to our company in a lot of ways. How do you approach that client so that the end result is going to be powerful and effective training? What are the steps that you go through?
So it is
things that, by the way,
yeah.
and phrase in a way that people listening don't need you to do it, that they could take it and do it themselves.
They could do it themselves. Yeah. There's obviously a process, a dedicated process to how we do this. I think the big takeaway is that it's important to understand what is the purpose of the training, what are you trying to achieve, and how do you measure that before you even design and produce the training. sometimes training that is thought of as an afterthought after you produce the training. And I think it's important to spend some time up front, really understanding the client and their needs and their restrictions before you even suggest what type of training you're going to do. But we follow loosely what's called the ADDIE model, which I'm sure most people on the show would be familiar with, and
But go ahead and explain it, because this show is made up of training professionals, people in HR that work in training but are not directly training professionals, and operations people. So please take a moment and share the ADDIE method with everyone.
Yeah, so the ADDIE method is basically an acronym of analysis, design, development, implementation, and evaluation. And part of that is to spend a good time up front to analyze what are you trying to achieve, what's the training used for before you start producing it. Then or instructional designers, who are basically the architects of the course, work closely with the subject matter experts at the client side. That could be one sometimes, or it could be a large team of subject matter experts, and basically convert their knowledge and their expertise into a sound curriculum that we then later down the process produce one or more courses based on. So first doing the analysis, then making a design, getting sign-off from the client that it makes good. It makes sense, the course, in terms of the course structure, the look and the feel, and other matters. And then it's kicked over into production, where the production team produced the course. That obviously has a different meaning, whether you create an e-learning course, or it's a simple job guide, or a virtual reality training course, in-person classroom training, and so on. But the overall process is the same. It's the nuances, obviously, within the type of modality. And then it's delivered over to the client after getting approval through X number of review processes. And then typically how we work with our clients is that, for example, if it's an e-learning course, they basically get the SCORM file, which is the e-learning file itself. They put that on their LMS system and they implement it. There are times we work with clients and we help with that, but often they take it from there. And then you have the evaluation afterwards on how well did the training do, and that's a whole topic in
Yeah,
itself.
and I was going to lead you right into that. So
Yeah.
this is a good segue. How do you know training is effective?
So it's a great question, and I think we as an industry are not good at that. There's a variety of reasons for it. As I mentioned earlier, I think that the training department needs to be more entrepreneurial. That said, there is also, at least working with some of our clients, it's sometimes hard to get the data and hard to get the KPIs. That could be confidentiality reasons. It could be internal politics that gets into the way, or other matters. So we sometimes find ourselves not being able to have access to the KPIs, and I think that is a shortcoming of the whole process. But we got to respect the fact that they don't necessarily want to share that with us. And then even if you get that, it's complex because there's a lot of factors that goes into it. There's you have the issue between correlation and causality, and it's even if you had access to the data every time, it's not necessarily easy to say, okay, the impact of the training was X.
It's interesting in the franchise world. Here's good news, bad news.
Yeah.
Good news is you can actually do an A/B test, because some of the franchisees choose not to use the training. That's the bad news, that some of the franchisees choose not to use the training. But you can actually look at a training program and say, okay, what were the sales? What were the average ticket? Whatever the goal was, what was the closing rate? And compare that to a group of people that chose not to do the training. And
Yeah.
I did this with a very large restaurant chain with 1,400 locations. And the training that they went through, there was an 8% delta difference in sales growth. There was a little drop for the people that didn't do the training. And then there was like a 2% drop for those that didn't do it, and a 6% uptick to do it. But given that the average restaurant was doing 2 million or more a year, an 8% delta is $160,000 worth of additional revenue, which is a terrific ROI.
That is, I would say, a luxury that compared to at least many of the sort of Fortune 500 companies that we work with, because they may not have the option of having a group that cannot take the training. So that is, yeah, it's bad if they don't take the training. Now, if I do take my devil's advocate hat on here, could it be that in terms of going back to correlation and causality, are the franchisees who don't take the training, are they the one who typically have more higher performance or lower performance? So we're mixing up the causality and correlation there too. But that
Well,
said, I do think that this it's a benefit of the franchise world having
yeah.
been able to look at the data that way.
Well, you make a good point, because typically the franchisees that are going to do the training are better franchisees,
Yeah.
typically speaking. Having said that, the baseline is the baseline.
Yeah.
But I've worked with other franchise things where the training people were intimidated by the marketing people and the operations people, because every time they talked about the impact of training, they go, no, it's our marketing that made the difference. It's it's the rollout of this new display system or whatever it is. And I think people in training need to have pride, and it's really, really helpful to have pride.
It motivates people
Yeah,
to continue taking the training.
yeah. You've used this word a couple times, which is this word modality.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of times in today's world, when people think of training companies, they think of e-learning. But training companies do a lot more than that. So maybe just take a moment and discuss sort of strategically how you choose modalities. And many times you choose more than one, right? It's not to say that it's all, because people learn in different ways, but what are your thoughts on modalities, and maybe I'll put some more structure on it. Budget comes into hand. So, when do you decide you're going to use one modality? When do you decide to use two? I know I'm asking you a big question. I'll give you 13 seconds. I'm joking. Take your time and answer the
Yeah.
question.
No, I think it's an important topic. It was one of the things that I noticed when I came into this industry, that I came across people who thought that one modality is a one size fits all. It's either e-learning is the best for everyone, regardless of the type of training, or in-person classroom training is the best. And just to back up, I guess, for the audience too, when I'm talking about modalities, it's the way that the training is delivered through. So is that an e-learning course, or is it in-person classroom training? Is it virtual live training, or VILT, which is a nice name for Teams or Zoom, or virtual reality training, AR training, job posting, or sorry, job guides, and a host of other different type. And we like to think of modalities as tools in a toolbox. So just as say a carpenter is building a house, he or she may use the hammer for one thing, a saw or different types of saw for different objectives, and drill for different objectives. And there's no one tool that fits for everything. Same thing with training. E-learning may be very suited in for some types of trainings or some situations, versus maybe not so well in others. And going back to the factors you mentioned, there's obviously cost is an important factor. I would say the topic is also an important factor. There's certain things that may lend itself well to e-learning, sitting remotely and doing it on your own time. While other things you may need to be in an in-classroom setting, like doing sales presentations or leadership type of training, where you do need that interaction of the other people in the group. So those are just two factors. There's a host of them. How, somewhat related to budget. Where's people located? Do you have people all over the world, or are they all in the same town? That may impact whether you're doing classroom training versus VILT or e-learning or some other modality. So it kind of goes back to the A in ADDIE. What's the objective of the course? What's the constraints? What's the budget? And then based on that, we choose one or more modalities that's best suited to fit that. And as you were referring to in terms of having more than one, we often find, particularly for larger training programs, that we use the hybrid model where some piece of the training lends itself best to e-learning, other ones maybe an in-person training or a train-the-trainer course, or and so on. So yeah, understanding the tools and how they fit the objectives is really, I think, is important when you create training.
Ever feel like your training sessions are getting a little old, a little tired? Want to add some excitement with some extended reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, 360 training? Well, you can do that today with the Learning Network. Your employees can immerse themselves in real-world scenarios, boosting engagement, more importantly, increasing knowledge retention. Learn more today by going to learning.net and book a demo and learn all about extended reality training. The time is now. As I listen to you and I think about the cost of e-learning, what's interesting about e-learning is if you're a small company, e-learning is expensive.
Yeah,
If you're a large company, e-learning is cheaper
exactly.
because you pay the same amount, you can spread it over thousands of people. But if you have 100 people, live training can be cheaper. One of the other points that I'll just bring up because I think it's an important point is you have two phases to training. One is the initial launch. Okay, we're going to get everyone on board. Very easy to do live training, very easy to do multiple, levels of training, multiple types simultaneously. But then you have new employees that come in after the launch. A little harder to do live training. So you almost need to think about your modalities of how we're going to launch the program, how we're going to get the program off the ground, and then what are we going to do for future new employees.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, we several of our clients come from the pharmaceutical world and the biotechnology world and other regulated industries. So not only may you have turnover of employees who needs the same type of training, but they may need a requirement to take the same course every year. So you got to look down a few years in your budget calculations of whether an e-learning or in-person training makes sense. Not to mention the fact that tracking it could sometimes be easier in an e-learning course than in-person training. So there's a lot of factors.
So there's a saying in training. I'm going to muck it up a little bit, but basically the saying is, what if I train them and they leave me? And of course, the retort to that is, what if you don't train them and they stay? But how much do you look at training as a retention tool? Is there a legitimate issue that companies that have high turnover, that spending and investing in employees is difficult? I'm kind of giving you a wide open question, but
yeah,
how do you, I'm sure you're pro training, no doubt about that. But how do you, if you're talking to somebody that has high turnover, what's the value of training to them?
No, it's a great question, open-ended, and I am biased for sure, coming from the managing training companies. And this is obviously a reflection that the clients have to do on their end, but I've seen plenty of data on retention or training being an important retention tool, particularly for the younger generations who views solid training at their employer as a incentive to stay and for them to develop themselves and enjoy and feel that they're growing, having a growth mindset. Yeah, back to your point on what if they stay if they're not trained. Now you have likely unproductive, maybe unmotivated employees. But I think having good and again engaging training and maybe a good plan on what that training means for that particular employee in terms of their career growth is an important retention tool. And again, I'm biased, but I've seen several studies out there that backs that up.
Yeah. It's interesting. I listened to a keynote speaker who is now the past chairman of the IFA,
Oh,
and he started working in a McDonald's, and he said, I was so excited to get trained on every piece of equipment. And then they made him, an assistant manager, and then to take all the training and manager, et cetera. And from that career in McDonald's, he ended up owning uh, hundreds, not McDonald's, of franchises,
wow.
and became an incredibly successful person. But McDonald's kept him much longer because they could keep educating him.
Yeah.
And I do think younger generations, and I think this is a very big generational things, appreciate training more as an important stop on their role in their career, and they want to learn a lot.
Yeah.
But kind of contrary to this, and this is for all the HR people, I talked to a restaurant chain and they had 65% turnover, which in restaurants is not bad. And I said, what would it be worth to the company to move that number from 65 to maybe 50 or 33? And he said something very interesting. He said, our biggest problem isn't that our turnover is too high, it's actually too low.
Hmm.
He said, because we are bringing in people that are not qualified or ever able to do the job. He
Hmm.
says, we need to do a much better job of hiring. And he did not say this, but I will add compensating so that you're going to attract people that are going to stay. Um, and I think a lot of times people don't invest, and this is my personal bias, but some great companies, I think good examples of this are Costco, Chick-fil-A, where they pay more, they make more careers out of their jobs, and their performance per unit is significantly better than their peers. So,
Also because it's if you have the right people, and they gotta be motivated, because obviously if there's no if you have the wrong employees, then the best training in the world wouldn't really change anything. But assuming you have motivated and culturally or employees who fit well for that culture, I I would dare to say that it's a lot cheaper to train them and keep them and have them on their growth path within the firm than to try to or see them leave and then bring in someone new that you may have to partially train. There may not be a cultural fit. That whole cost of having gap in specific roles and the recruiting and the hiring cost and so on. So if you can retain good employees, then I think training is a very vital key to that.
yeah. Well, and it's a true partnership between HR and training and operations for that matter.
Yeah.
Max, this is a great interview. I know the two of us, because we've talked before, could go on for a long, long time, but I'm sure our listeners want to know more about your two companies.
Yeah.
And please sort of share what your two companies do. One does compete with us, not fully, but a little bit, and the other one doesn't really compete with us. But we're at Training Unleashed a believer in quality training floats all boats, and there is plenty of room in this industry and opportunity for everyone to get better, which is why I invited you to be on the show.
Thank you. No, I completely agree. It's a huge world out there, and we need lots of great training companies to help move that forward. So I'm honored to be here, and yeah, in terms of so we have two companies. One is Training Systems Design, and we've been around for 22, 23 years, and we do custom training solutions. So we work predominantly with large corporations, as I explained earlier, in terms of how we work on creating training programs, and have created more than 1,000 courses since inception. And the other business kind of is we started up recently as we saw a need in the marketplace for that, and that is staff augmentation of learning professionals. So basically providing professional learning people to clients on a short-term basis. So there may be companies who need an instructional designer for 2 weeks or 6 months, whether in a generic fashion or specialized in a certain topic or function, and we provide that. So it's a nice complement to our main business.
So it's always best, people listening, to go to trainingunleashed.net or go to our YouTube channel, Training Unleashed Network, to get the show notes, to get the contact information. But Max, why don't you quickly share the 2 URLs of both of your companies with the audience?
Will do. And the first one is long. So it's Training Systems Design, where systems is plural. So trainingsystemsdesign.com. And our staff augmentation business is learningstaff in one word.com.
Great. Now, you have a great offer, and the people that are, so first off, it's a limited offer. So not everyone gets the offer. So you gotta move forward. And if you're listening to this 2 or 3 years after it posts, probably not going to have much of a chance. But
Yeah.
it's a great offer. So anybody who's a learning professional is going to want to listen very carefully. So go ahead,
yes.
Max.
Thank you. So we're, being a strong believer in ROI and performance tracking and so on for the learning. For the first 20 people who reach out, and you can do that either via our website, either one of the 2 that I mentioned, or to info@trainingsystemsdesign.com. For the first 20 people, we'll give a hard copy of Kirkpatrick's 4 levels of training evaluation.
And for those people that are not familiar, this book is like the Bible on training evaluations. Very good, excellent read for everyone. So thank you for that offer. And as you well know, because you are a listener to the show, we always end with one tip. So what is your one tip you want to share with everyone?
So my one tip is, have a plan and roadmap before you go down that road. So when it comes to training, understand upfront, what are you trying to achieve with the training? What's the objectives and what's the restrictions before creating the training? And I think you will get a lot better training as a fact of that. Excellent
tip. Thank you. On behalf of the Learning Network, we appreciate having you as a guest. Of course, I want to thank all of our listeners. I want to thank our sponsors, C-Suite TV and C-Suite Radio. Remind people our website is trainingunleashed.net, where you can get show notes, or go to our new YouTube channel, Training Unleashed Network. Everyone have a great day.